Ladies and gentlemen, today we are facing a new and more dangerous phase in regional security. A threat that cannot be traced to a single launch pad nor defeated by a single strike. This threat is what many analysts now call the multi-headed monster, Iran's sprawling and proxy-backed missile network that spans across the Middle East and has redrawn the rules of warfare, deterrence, and regional influence. This network is not a coincidence of geography, nor a reaction to recent events. It is a carefully constructed system designed over decades by the Iranian regime to encircle its adversaries, particularly Israel, with a web of missile-launching actors that can strike from multiple fronts. These aren't rogue militias with scavenged weapons. These are ideologically aligned, Iranian-funded groups with precision-guided systems, trained personnel, and increasingly advanced technological integration. From Hezbollah in Lebanon with its arsenal of over 100,000 rockets pointed at northern Israel, to Shiite militias in Iraq, capable of striking U.S. bases and Israeli-linked assets, to the Houthis in Yemen who've evolved from a local insurgency into a missile-capable regional disruptor, to militia cells in Syria, strategically placed along Israel's border. Each head of the monster is dangerous on its own. But when coordinated, they become a unified threat capable of overwhelming even the most sophisticated defense systems. This strategy gives Iran a powerful advantage, plausible deniability, and decentralized warfare. Tehran doesn't need to fire a single missile from its own territory to inflict damage. Its proxies can do it on its behalf, creating confusion in attribution, delay in retaliation, and complication in diplomatic responses. Moreover, the spread of these groups has geopolitical implications far beyond the immediate region. Missile threats from Yemen have disrupted global shipping lanes. Hezbollah's reach threatens not just Israel but U.S. interests. Iraq's militias challenge both domestic sovereignty and international security. This is not a local problem, it is a global strategic challenge. So what does this mean for Israel, for the Gulf states, and for the international community? It means that traditional deterrence no longer works the way it used to. It means that security must evolve to face a hybrid threat, where missile arsenals are embedded within civilian populations, spread across unstable states, and backed by a well-funded, ideologically motivated regime. In facing the multi-headed monster, we cannot afford to think in terms of isolated battles or limited responses. We must understand the full scope of this network, its interconnectivity and its strategic intent. Only then can we build a response that is not only reactive, but preventive and capable of restoring stability in a region being shaped by missile diplomacy. Iran has deliberately constructed a decentralized missile network through its proxies across the Middle East, fundamentally altering the nature of regional threats and making traditional concepts of deterrence and retaliation significantly more complicated. This network is not an accidental byproduct of regional unrest, but a calculated and long-term strategy by Tehran to establish military leverage far beyond its own borders. By embedding missile capabilities within various allied non-state actors, each with their own local legitimacy and operational autonomy, Iran has created a security dilemma for its adversaries that is incredibly difficult to contain or neutralize. What makes this network particularly effective is its dispersal and redundancy. Unlike a conventional state actor whose military infrastructure can be mapped and targeted, Iran's proxy missile forces are distributed among multiple territories, often operating within the borders of weak or failing states, where governance is minimal and oversight is limited. These proxies are deeply embedded in civilian areas, use mobile launchers, and often store weaponry in schools, mosques, or urban centers, making them harder to strike without significant collateral damage. This dispersion creates a type of missile fog in which the origin of any given attack may be ambiguous or attributed to a group whose direct connection to Iran is easily denied or obfuscated. Each arm of this decentralized force, whether it is Hezbollah in Lebanon, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, or the Houthis in Yemen, is equipped with different types of missiles, drones, and launch systems tailored to their geographic and strategic environment. Yet they operate with shared objectives to challenge Israeli, American, or Saudi interests, to destabilize adversarial governments, and to pressure regional actors into concessions that benefit Iran's long-term strategic vision. This coordination across various theaters means Iran can activate different fronts based on evolving geopolitical conditions, effectively controlling the tempo of conflict and keeping adversaries guessing as to where the next escalation will occur. Additionally, the command and control structure of this network is designed for resilience. Even if one group suffers a major loss, such as the assassination of a key commander or a major warehouse being destroyed, the others remain fully capable of continuing operation. This decentralization makes the network highly survivable and adaptable, reducing the effectiveness of decapitation strategies that might work against more centralized forces. It also means that any counterstrike by Israel or another actor may hit only one head of the Hydra, while the others continue to operate unabated. By decentralizing its missile capabilities through proxies, Iran has made the Middle East more volatile, less predictable, and more difficult to secure. It has blurred the lines between conventional warfare and insurgency, between state and non-state violence, and between direct conflict and proxy engagement. This strategy not only increases Iran's influence, but forces its enemies to fight on terms that are asymmetrical, geographically dispersed, and politically constrained. Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, Syrian fighters, and the Houthis are not simply localized militant factions acting independently. They are critical extensions of Iran's regional military strategy, each serving as an armed node within a broader missile deployment architecture. These groups represent more than ideological allies. They function as operational partners in Iran's quest to counterbalance Israeli and Western influence in the Middle East, particularly through the use of missile-based deterrence. Iran has systematically cultivated these groups, not only by providing them with ideological and political support, but more crucially, by equipping them with increasingly sophisticated missile systems, drone technology, and training in advanced targeting and launch techniques. Hezbollah, based in southern Lebanon, is the most formidable of these proxies, with an estimated arsenal of over 100,000 rockets and missiles, including precision-guided munitions that can target deep within Israeli territory. It operates effectively as a parallel military force, with its own command structure, surveillance capabilities, and supply chains, many of which are tightly integrated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iranian engineers and technicians have reportedly helped Hezbollah build underground missile factories and storage facilities, making it increasingly self-sufficient, while maintaining direct strategic alignment with Tehran's goals. In Iraq, Iran has cultivated a number of Shiite militias that now operate with significant autonomy and firepower. Groups like Kataib Hezbollah, Harakat al-Nujaba, and Asaib al-Haq are heavily armed with Iranian-supplied short-range ballistic missiles, drones, and rocket launch. These militias have conducted attacks on U.S. and Israeli-linked targets in Iraq and Syria, often acting as Iran's retaliatory arm without requiring Tehran to take direct responsibility. Their operations serve a dual purpose, undermining Western influence in Iraq, while reinforcing Iran's claim to be the protector of Shiite communities throughout the region. In Syria, Iranian-backed fighters, including local militias and imported Afghan and Pakistani units loyal to the IRGC Quds Force, are strategically positioned near the Golan Heights and other sensitive border zones with Israel. These fighters serve not only as a deterrent force but also as a forward operating base for missile deployment. With the Assad regime heavily reliant on Iranian support, Syria has effectively become a corridor through which missiles and launch systems are transferred from Iran to Hezbollah and other regional actors. The Houthis in Yemen are a more recent, but rapidly advancing component of this missile alliance. With Iranian technical and material support, they have developed indigenous ballistic missile and drone capabilities that have allowed them to target Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and more recently Israeli-linked maritime assets in the Red Sea. Their inclusion in the missile network extends Iran's reach to the southwestern flank of the Arabian Peninsula, and creates a new axis of pressure that affects both regional security and global trade. These proxy forces are not merely tactical tools. They represent a distributed strategic system built to challenge Israel and its allies from multiple directions simultaneously. The level of coordination and capability they have achieved under Iran's guidance has turned them into credible, semi-independent missile forces that complicate traditional military planning. With overlapping command channels, shared intelligence, and synchronized ideological goals, these groups collectively function as the interconnected heads of Iran's missile monster, each capable of launching coordinated or independent attacks based on regional triggers and Iranian strategic imperatives. Each proxy group under Iran's influence has been equipped not only with weaponry but with a systematic framework of training, logistical support and technological guidance that elevates them from irregular militias to structured, semi-conventional forces capable of waging sustained missile warfare. Iran's approach to arming these groups is deliberate and calibrated. It does not simply flood them with arms, but rather invests in building indigenous capacity, ensuring these proxies can assemble, store, maintain, and launch increasingly advanced missile systems independently. This long-term investment in capability building demonstrates Iran's intent to transform its regional allies into enduring instruments of power projection. The training component is central to this transformation. Iranian military advisors, often from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, travel to Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, or host operatives in Iran to provide detailed instruction in missile assembly, guidance systems, and targeting procedures. This training is not limited to small arms or tactical skirmishes. It includes advanced topics such as the integration of drones with missile attacks, radar evasion, mobile launch operations, and coordinated salvo firing to overwhelm enemy defense systems. As a result, these proxy forces have become increasingly autonomous in both planning and execution, requiring minimal direct Iranian intervention once a conflict begins. Equally important is Iran's logistical support system, which ensures a steady flow of missile components, replacement parts, fuel, and communications gear to these groups, despite intense surveillance and frequent interdictions by Israeli and Western intelligence services. Iran employs a variety of means to circumvent sanctions and blockades, including smuggling networks through Iraq and Syria, civilian airliners repurposed for military transport, and maritime shipping routes, masked by shell companies and forged manifests. In Yemen, for instance, Iranian weapons have reached the Houthis through a sophisticated network of maritime routes, sometimes disguised as humanitarian aid or commercial shipments. This persistent supply chain allows Iran's proxies to restock and upgrade their arsenals even after suffering significant battlefield losses. On the technological front, Iran has also exported know-how that allows proxies to locally manufacture missile parts and even assemble entire systems. Hezbollah has been able to establish underground missile production facilities in Lebanon with Iranian assistance, while the Houthis have developed indigenous variants of Iranian designs like the Qayyam and Fet. In Iraq and Syria, proxy groups have similarly begun manufacturing drones and modifying artillery rockets for longer range and improved accuracy. This shift towards self-sufficiency reduces the vulnerability of the network to supply chain disruptions and ensures that attacks can continue even if Iranian territory is geographically or politically constrained. Another defining feature of these groups' capability is their use of mobile and concealed launchers, which are designed to fire missiles and relocate within minutes, complicating enemy counterstrikes. This tactic mirrors Iranian doctrine, which emphasizes survivability and the ability to engage in protracted asymmetric warfare. These launch systems are often placed in densely populated or civilian areas, further complicating any military response and raising the political and ethical costs of retaliation for Israel and its allies. Together, the training, arming, and technical upgrading of these proxy forces has produced a distributed missile network that is not only large in number, but sophisticated in structure. Each group, while capable of acting independently, operates in concert with Iran's larger strategic goals. They can be activated simultaneously to create multi-front pressure, or staggered to maintain a steady tempo of escalation. In either case, their readiness and capability are directly linked to years of Iranian investment, militarily, ideologically, and logistically. The missile network Iran has cultivated across the Middle East is a textbook case of hybrid warfare, a strategic model that combines conventional military elements with irregular tactics, cyber operations, psychological warfare, and proxy engagement. This model does not seek battlefield dominance through sheer firepower alone, but rather aims to exhaust, confuse, and destabilize adversaries through a mixture of constant pressure, deniable aggression, and layered threats. By embedding missile arsenals within loosely affiliated non-state groups and dispersed civilian environments, Iran has created a web of asymmetric power that is immune to quick military solutions and increasingly difficult for conventional forces to counter. Hybrid warfare as employed by Iran involves blending the strategic strengths of state-sponsored military development, such as advanced missile systems and surveillance technology, with the operational flexibility of non-state actors. These proxy forces, such as Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iraqi militias, are not bound by the rules of conventional warfare or the constraints of international law in the same way that state actors are. This gives them the freedom to operate from civilian zones, to engage in high-risk provocations, and to ignore the diplomatic consequences of their actions, all while being backed by the resources and expertise of a state like Iran. This merging of formal military power with informal militant tactics allows Iran to wage persistent, adaptable conflict at a relatively low cost. The missile threat from these groups is not a random act of violence, but a carefully orchestrated tactic within this hybrid framework. Short-range rockets, medium-range ballistic missiles, and increasingly cruise missiles and drones are used in tandem to disrupt air defense systems, saturate missile shields, and create psychological and material damage. The goal is not necessarily to achieve total military victory, but to inflict enough disruption and fear that Israel and other adversaries are forced into reactive postures, diverted from broader strategic objectives, or deterred from future action. In this sense, missile launches serve as both a physical weapon and a psychological tool, instilling uncertainty, panic, and political instability. Iran's hybrid strategy also includes the manipulation of legal and ethical boundaries to its advantage. By embedding missile storage facilities in urban centers, near hospitals, schools, or religious sites, its proxies create human shields that deter or delay retaliation due to the risk of civilian casualties and international condemnation. This places adversaries like Israel in a moral bind: either refrain from striking and allow the threat to persist, or strike and risk global backlash for collateral damage. This is not accidental, it is a deliberate tactic that uses the humanitarian norms of modern warfare as a shield against technologically superior enemies. Another key component of this hybrid approach is Iran's integration of cyber operations and electronic warfare into its broader missile strategy. Iranian-supported groups have increasingly used GPS spoofing, drone jamming, and cyber infiltration to disable early warning systems, disrupt military communications, and confuse missile defense radar. These digital attacks are often timed with physical strikes to maximize chaos and limit the effectiveness of countermeasures. In this environment, the battlefield is no longer confined to physical terrain. It extends into cyberspace, the media, and the minds of civilian population. Hybrid warfare also relies on Iran's ability to sustain long-term, low-level conflict without depleting its resources. By using proxies as the operational front, Iran shields its own population and infrastructure from the direct consequences of warfare, while its adversaries are forced to spend heavily on constant readiness, missile defense, intelligence gathering, and civilian protection. This war of attrition favors Iran's long-game strategy to wear down its enemies politically, economically, and psychologically over time, even if it cannot defeat them outright in open battle. Ultimately, this hybrid model of missile warfare gives Iran a strategic edge far beyond its conventional military side. It allows Tehran to shape the battlefield without appearing on it directly, to challenge stronger militaries without risking all-out war, and to influence regional politics through sustained, multifaceted pressure. The more these tactics evolve, the more difficult it becomes for Israel and its allies to respond in a way that is decisive, lawful, and strategically advantageous. Traditional deterrence strategies, which were once effective in managing state-to-state hostilities through clear red lines and the threat of overwhelming retaliation, have proven increasingly inadequate in the face of Iran's proxy missile network. The evolving nature of this threat, dispersed, semi-deniable, and operating across multiple domains, renders conventional deterrence models outdated and in many cases counterproductive. In previous eras, the knowledge that a direct attack would be met with a devastating and proportionate response was often sufficient to prevent escalation. However, Iran's current approach, which utilizes armed groups that are technically independent but ideologically and logistically linked to Tehran, has blurred the lines of accountability and challenged the assumptions underpinning classical deterrence. The very structure of the Iranian proxy system insulates Iran from the full consequences of its actions. When Hezbollah launches rockets into northern Israel, or when the Houthis fire ballistic missiles at Israeli and Saudi targets, Tehran can plausibly claim that these are local responses to regional grievances, not directives issued from the Iranian capital. This